have we gotten an update on this Marcellus Williams case? Because we heard that the execution was scheduled for about 7 p.m., I believe, Eastern time, right? So it would have been over an hour ago now.
Well,
Can we Google? My devices are tied up. I got the game here. It looks like the Braves are winning. Unfortunately, I got the laptop, the webcam running the podcast. I got the Instagram live going on the cell phone. So
I'm looking here. I did see that his final words were posted.
hmm,
He signed the last word statement, and his last statement was all praise be to Allah in every situation.
okay.
And that was his
Islam. So I guess to get into the case a little bit, I started seeing TikToks. And I know we had touched on this. This will probably lead into our poll next, but I was seeing TikToks about this case, and you saw a lot of people calling on people to send letters to the governor and the attorney general of Missouri to stop the execution. You also had a lot of people saying that this person has been proven innocent by DNA evidence. And I was doing some digging on that. I was not able to verify that. I did see that there was some, I guess, muddying of the waters here. It looked like perhaps the knife that was used in the case was handled by the prosecutor's office without gloves, and some of their DNA apparently got on the weapon, and so that was obviously a problem. But I didn't see that DNA proved his innocence. I did see people on TikTok saying that. And I think there's a concern, we mentioned that last week, about misinformation spreading and the
yeah.
possibility some of it is even used as propaganda, right? You don't know to what extent China, for example, might be pushing some of these messages to Americans to try to get to, manipulate their behaviors and their thoughts or whatever. So it did remind me of that. Again, I don't know with any certainty if that's happening here, but when I started seeing these TikToks pop up, it did remind me of that discussion we had last week about that, especially given the fact that some of the things that they were saying, I wasn't able to verify. I'm like, I don't even know if this is really true, what's what they're saying, you know?
Right. What I think
Yeah.
what's important here is the parties that wanted his execution to be stopped. So the
The Innocence
prosecutor,
Project. Yeah.
but even prosecutors
Right.
have raised
Right.
concern. The
Well, that's a
prosecuting
different
office,
discussion. Yes. Yes. I was just making a point that I didn't see that his innocence was proven. Or DNA showed that he definitely didn't do it. I haven't seen that. I've seen people
I
say
think there
that on
was
TikTok, but I never
from
saw
the
that
article
anywhere. Have there been any credible articles or anything?
from the article that I read from the Guardian, it said that the prosecutors had raised concern about the lack of DNA
Right.
evidence.
Right. That's what I had seen. That I guess there was DNA evidence, but it wasn't really reliable because it had the prosecutor's fingerprints on it. Basically the prosecutor's DNA was mixed in with it, and so they said that that it's not the best evidence to use. I haven't seen DNA evidence proving his innocence, but
Right.
all right.
But the lack of is what they're questioning.
Right, right. And I think there was maybe a last minute request for a further evidentiary hearing on that. And I know appeals are still in process even now, as it looks like this execution is going forward or might have gone forward. So you,
Yeah.
you raise a point here that the original prosecutor, I think even the judge, right, the victim's family, they all wanted the sentence to change from the death penalty to life imprisonment. And apparently that deal was reached. They were all in agreement of it. But then you have political actors come in, the attorney general of Missouri and the governor of Missouri, right? Both Republicans who apparently, from what I'm seeing, put pressure on the Missouri Supreme Court, which is their highest court, to stop this and to continue on with the execution.
Right. Um, so yeah, what I'm seeing here, I've only seen a minor report that says that it went through, but I haven't seen any credible sources yet.
A minor report said that the execution went through.
Yeah, it's from something called Scripps News.
Okay. I've seen some of their stuff before, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I wouldn't count them credible. I don't know enough of them, so I'm looking for like
Yeah.
a guard
Yeah.
Axios,
Mainstream.
and
Yeah.
so far, none of them has said that it's happened yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Well, I
I
always
think
get a bad feeling from these cases, really from any death penalty case. In New
yeah,
York, we don't have it anymore at the state level, but this is in Missouri, right? Obviously, other states in some cases still do it, and I never liked the way it feels. remember
No.
my dad never really got too political with me, but the one political position I can remember him expressing to me was, if it's illegal for man to kill, it should be illegal for the state to kill. And
Right.
I feel that way too. I don't think killing should be appropriate, should be an appropriate penalty.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it should be because, one, if killing is a thing, then yeah, that's all thing they shouldn't do it either. And two, the absoluteness of it. Um,
Right, the finality of it. Yeah,
yeah, it really takes away the possibility of exoneration, especially when we see how many innocent people
right.
are in the system.
But you see now, and I'm already drawing comparisons to our previous discussion, there are many people on this issue who will say there shouldn't even be any appeals. You're wasting money because you raise the point that it takes so long for all these cases to go on, appeals to go on, and to execute someone actually costs the state more money in the long run than life imprisonment because of all the process. There are a lot of people who will say there shouldn't be any process. Basically, as soon as the case is over, take them out back and shoot them. That reminds me of people who say facts don't matter. They're in my house. I killed them. You know what I mean? That's this extremist, absolutist mentality.
Yeah. I think that, that long-term wait is what is necessary. I mean, I don't think it should be a death penalty, but if you have it, there definitely should be a long-term wait because you should give time to, poke holes in the case.
Right.
I mean, you need to be absolutely sure you're taking someone's life. It's done. There's nothing after it. You can't reverse that decision. So you need time for that. There can be differences. Like in this case here, there's some contaminated evidence. Different parties agree that it shouldn't go to killing. The high number of exonerations that we've seen, the Innocence Project have put out, statistics on how many people are charged, and behind bars on these types of things. So if we're in a system where innocent until proven guilty and we want to have a fair and balanced system, we should take our times on these things. If there is a reasonable doubt is what we're supposed to
Mm-hmm.
be trying to beat that threshold,
Okay.
I think we need to honor
But
that instead of thinking, oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
so just to push back on that, you mentioned innocent until proven guilty, and you mentioned reasonable doubt. I mean, there are people who will say, okay, well, the person was proven guilty, found guilty by a court of law beyond a reasonable doubt. And so, what is there to talk about, right? And we're talking about appeals after the fact. And to
Right.
be fair, I believe this crime happened in 1988. So we're talking a very long time ago here. The person is now being executed for, if it was the person who did it, we don't know for sure. But a very long time has passed.
1998, by the way.
1988, no?
1998.
1898? No,
1998.
1998. Okay, I thought it was 88. Okay, so still a quarter century has passed,
Yeah,
right? And that's a very long time. I mean,
sure.
are we saying that someone should be allowed to appeal for 50 years, 100 years? You know what I mean? Like, at what point, if you're going to cut it off, do you cut it off? Or do you say you should be able to prove your innocence for the rest of your life, even after you've been, let's say, found guilty and your appeals have been dismissed?
Well, I think when there are questions in the case, I don't think there should be a limit. I don't think, there have been questions in the case. If we're
There
talking
are always
about,
questions, though. So, but who decides if there are questions in the case?
well, then there could be things that were not questions in the case. I
You're a
think we're talking
lawyer. You're
about
always going to
killing
find a
someone.
question, right? You're
We're
a lawyer
talking about
for someone.
killing
You're going to
someone.
poke 1,000 holes in any case.
Well,
Who
yeah,
decides
but
if that threshold was met, right?
well, in this case, lack of DNA evidence, there's contamination. Even
Mhm.
the prosecuting officers say they didn't get a fair trial. Um, I think that's enough to say, you know what, we need to back off here.
They
We've
always
got
say
to
we
do
didn't get a
that.
fair trial. You know what I mean? Like these
But
points
the
are always right.
prosecutors say that he didn't get a fair
Oh,
trial.
so
That's a
okay. So you're saying that the burden's on a prosecutor. That's an interesting point, right? So if the prosecutor himself or herself says, "Oh, hold up, this conviction shouldn't stand," then maybe we should look into that.
right. I mean, because it's not unheard of that the original prosecutor had special interest in it, or
Right.
the state at the time
Yeah.
had ulterior motives on it,
Right.
or
Well, see,
public
adversarial
pressure.
adversarial system, right? The prosecutor is under pressure to win more cases, and
That as well. I don't think
they
that
run for
should.
election. They don't want to lose a high profile case, and all that kind of stuff.
I think that's a problem too, and I think we've talked about that before, in relation to the police,
Mm-hmm.
where I don't think their performance should be based on how many people they put away, how many people they arrest, because then it gives them an incentive to put people away, right? The idea should be to find out the truth, right? And then prosecute them when you get the truth. If at any point, there shouldn't be ego in it. If at any point you find out, okay, wait a minute, my evidence
Mm-hmm.
may not give the right information, you should be allowed to back off. You should back off and you should be penalized
Well,
for it.
okay, but in this particular case, we have the prosecutor now saying that we shouldn't have the execution. It should be life in prison, right? We've got, I believe, the original judge. We've got the victim's family, right? So all these parties are on board.
Right.
Should that end the discussion? I mean, should that be enough? Should the governor or the attorney general or even the state's high court be able to intervene at that point and say, I don't care what you guys say, we're going through with this anyway?
Uh, I think I think it should definitely I think so. I think not that they should come to us and say we're going through it anyway. I think that should be enough to say, okay, we're going to stop this. Maybe there's some things we still need to work out.
Mm-hmm.
I think
So
it sounds
you don't think that the Supreme Court of Missouri in this case should be able to overturn that decision? You think they shouldn't be allowed? They shouldn't have the jurisdiction to even touch it.
I don't think they should be the we're talking about a life here, so I don't think
Yeah.
that's, there's questions. I don't think they should
Right.
rule in that way, is
Right.
what I'm saying.
Okay.
We should go to them for the final judgment, but they should be on board this idea that we're trying to protect life, we're trying to preserve the fairness. And so their ruling should be, okay, there are all of these interests here, and there's all these discrepancies here. Okay, we should definitely stop this. But it seems like there's more of a motivation to want to do it. And that's the issue. The governor wants to execute this guy, right? The prosecute, not the prosecutor,
Attorney General.
yeah, the attorney general wants to execute this guy. And that is the problem. And the court is supposed to be, or we hope, ideally, they're that unbiased
Well,
and
we
want to
did see
say,
reports that these politicians, right, put pressure, that's what they said in the articles, put pressure on the high court to rule the way it did. Obviously, if you read the decision of the Supreme Court, it's not saying we're ruling this way because we got a phone call from the governor, right? They're saying that they haven't um, seen or they haven't considered or they were never presented, I guess, any evidence showing that the person was innocent, and so there's no reason to stop the execution from going on as scheduled.
right. But I think this is my question is why? Why are they wanting to go for it? I don't think that they're saying we haven't been shown any evidence. We've
That's
seen,
what they're saying. That's what the Supreme Court is saying. They're saying that look, this execution was scheduled already. It happened over a quarter century ago. The crime, they've had the quarter century to appeal it. They've exhausted their appeals, or through all the court proceedings that they've had on this, his innocence was never proven. They never were able to show that he was innocent. And so, why, basically, why are we still doing this? This is done. This is a done deal. There's no evidence to exonerate him, and so
right, but the prosecutors have raised concerns over the lack of DNA evidence. So
right,
I think to me that's enough to say, okay, we're not going to murder this guy. You know what
right.
I mean? We're not
Well,
going to
see, to
kill this
me,
guy.
I
It's
don't think,
over.
yeah, I don't think there ever should be a death penalty, especially
No,
not in
I
like,
agree.
like this. We're talking
I
about
agree.
a state level case here.
I
This is
agree.
not a military type thing, right? This is for a state crime. I think
Right.
that life in prison without the possibility of parole should be the maximum available punishment.
I
And
agree.
I think to me that's the main issue, right? But as an attorney, I guess I started thinking about the process and due process and how things should be contested. I'm not comfortable with the idea of basically anytime there's a question about a case, it has to stop. The punishment has to stop, right? Let's take death penalty off the table, whatever the punishment is. We basically, you know what I mean? Like it gets overturned or it gets stopped or um, just based on someone poking a hole in the case, because people will always poke a hole in a case. You have to decide who determined whether that hole is big enough, right? Now, it's an interesting idea to say, well, if the original prosecutor says so, but you know what? Just as they were biased before, they could be biased now too. I mean, is their word gospel? Do they hold the ultimate power over all of their cases that they ever did in their career?
Well, let me be, I don't know if this is the original prosecutor. So let's be clear here. The article that I read said prosecutors have raised concerns, and then the other says the prosecuting office
Mm-hmm.
has backed an agreement. So that could be the present day prosecuting office, not the original prosecutor.
Right. For some reason, I thought it was the original prosecutor, but it could be a different
It
one.
could be. It could be, but from what I'm reading on the article that I'm looking at,
Okay.
it doesn't say
But even if
specific.
it's a successor, it's still that same office,
Right.
right? It's just the person who's in there now.
Well,
And so
that person then.
do they have the ability then to just go and stop the punishment from proceeding of every case that their predecessors tried?
I think they should be.
Really? Just
I,
you want to give the prosecutor that much power to stop all
or
of these?
I think we should always be trying to not push for that punishment if there's a question of it, right? If there is a question at all point, if a case that
Yeah.
happened 15 years ago is found that maybe that there was some mishandling, I think we should relook at it. I mean, we're talking about people's either their
Who decides?
life.
The question again is who decides? Does the court decide that? Because we're saying that we don't think that the state Supreme Court should get to make that decision, right? So who does? The prosecutor unilaterally can make that decision. People on TikTok make that decision. I mean, who decides that?
Who decides that we
That there's enough holes in a case
take a look at this again?
yeah, or that it shouldn't.
I
You know,
think
the
the
punishment
system
shouldn't
should
continue.
be. I think the problem is, I think the system should be geared towards wanting to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about before about how the system is turned a lot more punitive,
Right.
right?
And I was going to make
And
that point. Yeah, no, you're right. When it comes to the death penalty in particular, there's no evidence that it is a deterrent at all, right? It's strictly punitive. It's strictly a form of
right,
retribution, but it
right,
doesn't stop crimes from happening, right? People who are going to commit a capital offense don't stop and think, I might be executed for this, therefore I'm not going to do it. They don't have that mindset, right?
right,
So there's no evidence that it actually stops anyone from committing a crime.
right. Yeah, I think our system should be looking for possibilities to not. Well, look, we already agree we don't think the death penalty should be there, but
Right.
for being able to, not take someone's life away, we want to be absolutely sure. Even life in prison is still your whole life is gone. You only get one.
Yeah.
Like, you need to
Yeah.
be, and if there's any evidence that does come up that there was a mishandling, there was a special interest, or there was false evidence, anything that comes up, I think should be admissible and presentable at any time later, because the ruling would have been made off of false pretenses. And
Yeah, but you could always raise something. I understand we believe
sure,
the facts in this case more because we're seeing these articles and we're more sensitive to that. But you could always raise a question. You could always say they mishandled the evidence. They
sure,
didn't, they weren't given a right to testify. They thought they didn't have. I saw that one myself. Someone came to me once and said, this person is, they should get a new trial. Why? Because their lawyer never told them that they had a right to testify. And the lawyers prevented them from testifying. All right, well, you could always say that, but how are you going to prove that? How are you going to prove that their rights were violated? I mean,
right.
there's always a hole that you can poke in any case, and still someone has to decide whether your argument has merit or not, right? So
Absolutely.
this is you saying it. If there are holes, okay, but who decides it? Normally, the court would decide it. But if we're saying that the Supreme Court or the High Court of the state should not get to decide it, then who does? Where does the buck stop? Who's the ultimate arbiter of whether there are holes in the case such that another appeal should be granted, or the punishment should stop, or the execution should be halted, or whatever the case is, right? Who decides that? Who should be the ultimate arbiter of that question?
I think it's supposed to be the Supreme Court. It should be the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court's motivation shouldn't be one of punitive. They should be concerned with the fairness. So I think that's what the difference is that they seem to want to make this happen versus want to not have this happen.
hold on a second. I got a comment here on the IG Live saying they killed my son, 15 years old in Queens, and the kid was not charged with murder. Wow. I'm really sorry to hear that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, well, I'm interested on your thoughts on this as well. Who do you think should be the arbiter? I mean, should this be a matter of the courts, the prosecutor? Should the prosecutor have the unilateral ability to make a decision like this when
Well,
it comes
maybe,
to,
yeah.
yeah? Because in
I
this
don't think
case,
they
we're
should.
talking about the execution of Marcellus Williams, where the High Court of the state said that the execution should proceed, even though the prosecutor said no, and the victim's family said no, and I think the original judge said no. I mean, people were saying that this should be a matter of life in prison, and the High Court of the state, it seems at the behest of the governor and attorney general, said continue the execution. So we're trying to
Let
figure
me ask you this.
yeah,
Let
we're
me ask
trying
you
to figure
this.
this all out. Go ahead.
So this is a case from 1998,
Yeah.
right? So let's assume we don't know. There's a different prosecutor in the prosecuting office today, right? The present day prosecutors find that they look at this old case and they're like there's concerns about the lack of DNA evidence. Do you think they should be able to bring this back up, reopen it to test it? They find that maybe there's some discrepancy in one of their old cases. Do you think they should be able to
The
do it?
person was already
They're,
tried.
they're in jail. They've been in jail. This guy's been in jail, but you're in the prosecuting office now. You're going through the old cases here. You look in this and like, wow, this is a little flimsy. This doesn't there's lack of
Oh,
DNA evidence.
I see what you mean. Should the prosecutor be able to like bring a motion to reopen the case?
Right.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So I think that's the idea.
But
And I don't know.
hold on
Maybe
a
I'm
second.
wrong.
But that doesn't stop. That doesn't automatically undo the punishment, right? They can bring the
But if
case
the
back
case
up, but the court can find that whatever they are presenting isn't persuasive and say, yeah,
but if they bring
you,
the case back up,
you bring it back up, right? And the court says, look, we appreciate this new evidence or whatever you're presenting to me, but we don't find it compelling, and we believe that the punishment should continue. I think that the court has that right as well.
right. But in that case, in the case of something like this, the death penalty,
Mm-hmm.
should that reopening stop that execution date?
Should it
Now, if
provide?
you're in jail, I'm saying if you're in jail, I'm not saying, okay, well, we're reopening it. They should be let out because we're not sure. We're talking about death at this point. Should that,
I think I still think. Well, you're talking about the prosecutor doing that, not just a defense lawyer or somebody, right? In particular, prosecutor bringing a motion like that.
in this case, yeah,
Yeah.
prosecutor. I think
I
it's,
think that's probably more compelling than if the defense attorney did. Because if you just
I agree.
like anytime a defense attorney brought a motion to the court that stays the execution, well, they would do that every single time. And again, we
Absolutely.
don't agree that it should be executions in the first place, but we're also interested in a fair system.
Right.
And let's say it's not about the death penalty. Let's say it's about life in prison. Should
Right.
the attorney just be able to file a new motion indefinitely to stop the prison
Right.
sentence from happening? I don't think so. I think a court should
Right.
have to say it's warranted here.
Right. And I think that's one of the particular points in this case is that the prosecutor is
Yeah.
raising concerns.
Yeah.
I think to me that carries a lot more weight, like you said, than the defending attorneys, because they're going to want to do that anyway. But the
Right.
prosecutor, the idea that most people have is that they want to win the case. But if they're saying, hey, wait a minute, there's something here, I think the court should take a listen to that and say, okay, well, all right, well, let's hold on here, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't,
It's
let me see, I'm
interesting.
gonna refresh here.
What if, here's the question. What if you have a, a, a very political prosecutor? We talk about how the prosecutors are elected, right? So what if you have a prosecutor now who thinks it's going to help their career by getting more people out of prison or by stopping punishments
Sure,
or proceeding,
sure.
and they just start filing motions left and right to undo all of the cases that their predecessor had tried? I mean,
Sure.
can that be an issue of, hold up, we're taking the power out of the court's hands and letting the prosecutor do whatever they want?
No, there definitely should be some checks on all of it.
Okay.
Um, yeah. I'm looking here and the news just came up. So they did execute Marcellus Williams. Um, Let's see, by lethal injection. So it went through. His death went through. This is from ABC News.
Wow.
Yeah.
That always rubs me the wrong way when I hear that.
Yeah.
State executing. It's to me that's murder. The state is committing murder. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. I agree. Um,
And by the way, we have to also express sympathy to the victim of the original crime, right? Because that was also, it seems, a murder victim. So it's not to say that we support one over the other. No, we think that they're both wrong, right? If murder is wrong, murder is wrong.
right.
Yeah,
And in this case, to be clear, the victim's family has backed the agreement to avoid the
right,
death penalty.
right. And I think that
So,
raises the question too. People often look at it like, I'm going to press charges, right? I'm going to bring charge. Like they think of it as a private person able to go into the court and direct a certain outcome. But
right.
really, it's up to the prosecutor and the court system. Even the victim's family doesn't get to decide. I mean, we can have a conversation about should that matter, right? If someone is sentenced to death, should the victim's family be able to present a petition to say we don't want them executed, or does that not really matter?
Right. Yeah.
You know, but I mean,
So,
we
and
just said that we think that there should be some kind of check on all of this. It
yeah.
would be the court to provide
Yeah.
that check, right? So
Yeah.
uh,
The
they did,
motivation is what,
on paper, they did what they were tasked to do. We just,
right.
I think, raise questions about all of this when we
Right.
reach an outcome such as this one.
Right, because there are possibilities to have all kinds of different things affecting it. Like you said, political motivations could be there. Um, Media coverage could be issue. The people's careers that rely on this. Well, in this case, the prosecutor agreed that it should be stopped, but in some cases, the prosecutor wants that win. So all those things. And we should also note, I don't think we've said it enough, that um, Williams, the man that was executed, has maintained his innocence this whole time.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's not a good outcome all the way around.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and this was here, I'm reading here, apparently the Republican governor in 2017, Eric Greitens,
Mhm.
granted a reprieve before the scheduled execution, citing DNA testing on the knife, which showed no trace of Williams' DNA. He set up a panel to review the case, but then when Mike Parsons, the current Republican governor, took over, he disbanded the board and pushed for the execution to proceed. So even the former governor thought, yo, we should stop this and,
Right.
and look more into this. It was when this new governor took over, he said, no, we're going to go ahead and kill this guy.
Right. And see, it's very alarming that a lot of this does seem to be politically motivated, right? They make these political calculations. That goes back to the Kamala discussion as well to try to draw a bottom line here. But a governor or someone running for governor might make that part of their campaign. I'm going to be tougher on crime. You just watch.
Right.
You know what I mean? And maybe that's
Right.
their platform. And they get in and
Yeah.
I can't stop this execution. I need this on my record as governor, right? To show I'm so tough. I killed this guy, and that's going to get me more votes with this set of voters over here or whatever. You're playing
Right.
politics with someone's life, right? And
Yeah.
that's very unsettling. And so
Absolutely.
this whole idea even of the governor being able to grant clemency, right? And you always see a last minute request to the governor's office to stop the execution. Um, I don't know.
Yeah.
Should we even allow that? I mean, I do like it when governors do that, when they do stop it, right? But this idea of basically the governor is one person, one individual who decides whether someone lives or dies, that's a little shaky to me when you consider the political context of all this.
Right. What about if the governor has the power to stay the execution, but doesn't have the power to push for it to continue?
Push forward for it to continue.
Yeah.
Oh, but how would that work? If they're scheduled to be executed, the governor gets a call. Do they say yes or no? We're going to stop it or not?
Right. What if they have the power to only say, yes, we can stop it, but doesn't have the power to say, no, we're not going to stop it? We leave that to the courts.
So then they don't have any power at all.
Well, they have the power to stop it.
but they can't say no. They can, when asked, they can only say yes, we're stopping it.
Right. That's the only option that they have.
They don't
Is
have any power. If it's a yes, no question, but the only answer is yes.
the only input that they can put in. If it's on the table, there are different hands that can do different things, right? The court is the ultimate decider for making sure it happens, but the governor also has the like a the golden buzzer to say, hey, we need to stop this, right? He doesn't have the power to say, no, we need to make it happen.
Right, but that's how
He's not a lawyer. He doesn't understand these things, right? He
that's
wasn't
how
in
it
a
is
case.
now, though, right? That's how it is now. The governor doesn't put someone on death row, but the governor gets a call saying, "Can you please stop it?" Right? Can you grant them
Right.
clemency, stop the execution? And they can say, "Yes, I'm going to stop it," or "No, I'm not going to stop it." But they can't.
But he also put things in motion here to make sure this happened. Like he
Well, that's what
disbanded
the
the.
reporting was, that he urged the court, which that's
Right.
inappropriate. If that's true, I don't think
Right.
that, that's, to me, that's crossing the balance of power that we're supposed to have, right? You're supposed to
Right.
have the judicial branch as a check on the executive. That's supposed to have them in collusion, saying we're going to execute this guy. So
Now, there's one other point that, I mean, we've been a little bit long on this, but there
yeah,
is one other point to raise in regards to this governor. And you mentioned it before in the pregame, is that he was from 1993 to 2004, he was the sheriff. He
yeah,
was a
yeah.
sheriff in there. So he comes from the law enforcement background, which um could play into his decision that, yeah, we're not gonna to stay this execution.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. And also that could be part of the politics here, right? He's running for governor. I'm a sheriff. And it'll be interesting to look at his campaign commercials, even when he was running, right? I could imagine him in a sheriff's uniform, or, presenting himself as being very tough on crime. And, crime is up in our state right now. And I'm getting there and make sure that we put these criminals away, and give them the ultimate punishment, send them to their maker, whatever. I can see him campaigning with that kind of rhetoric. And now that he's in office, feeling that he needs to follow up on that.
Right. Absolutely. You know what I'm curious about, and I'm going to look here. Um, he was the sheriff of Polk County
Mhm.
during the time when this crime occurred. Was that in his county that he was sheriff of?
Mm. Yeah.
So
Does he have any
that,
personal connection with this individual,
right.
Williams? Did he have run-ins with him before? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is he
Um,
personally biased?
yeah. So it looks like it might not be so. This was it looks like he was sheriff in, or no, this took place in St. Louis County, but he was sheriff in Polk County, which seems to be in a different area.
All right. Well,
But he might have those connections
right.
in.
Sure. Fellow sheriffs, so
Go ahead.
whatever. So let's put the poll question out now that it seems like this has officially happened. The poll question of the week is: did you think Marcellus Williams should have been spared the death penalty?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would like to hear why as well, right? If possible, is it because you're always against the death penalty? Did you believe he was innocent? Did you have questions about the process, lack of evidence, as you said, perhaps contaminated evidence in this case? I mean, what is your reasoning for answering the way you are?